Hi there, everybody. I just got finished watching the Time for School video movie thing, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really interesting seeing how different kids have their take on education and how their countries, the country's philosophy is on education and how their kids should be educated. I liked how it started off the video by saying how every child has a dream and every child needs an education most of the time to achieve that dream. And beginning in Afghanistan, I thought it was crazy that more people are starting to be enrolled in school, which is great for them because that will help. Education, I feel, is the foundation for everything else that needs to happen. A stronger government, better nutrition, child mortality rates going down, that kind of stuff is very important. But I found it interesting to know that still 1/3 of all kids are still not enrolled in school, and most of those kids are girls. And how their view on girls getting an education is very low. They don't really care for it and they kind of look down on it. And a lot of that reason is because of the Taliban, because they're against it and they actually attack schools that young girls are going to get an education, which is shocking and terrible. They spoke about one specific girl, and I thought it was inspirational how much she wanted to go to school and how much she valued her education and how she wanted to be able to teach others. That's what she wanted to do. She wanted to be a teacher or a doctor or I believe an engineer, she said. And she's inspirational, which makes me think how sometimes I take my schooling for granted and kind of whine and complain about going to school and getting an education, whereas in Afghanistan, girls don't even have the chance to, and if they do, which it's getting better, but the Taliban attacks those schools where girls are going, and it's just a horrible situation, which makes more girls want to not even go to school, not risk it, not risk getting hurt or getting killed or having the school burnt down. Her strength is inspirational to me because it's a risk for her to go to school every day and like risking her life to get an education, and she still wants to so bad. In sociology right now we're studying cultural relativism, and I noticed that when she was talking about going to school and in her religion class how they have to wear the scarves on their heads and how the teacher was super strict that they had to have their scarves on and they had to make sure that most of their head was covered, and how they were required to be quiet, and he was just very strict with them. And as an American, I would view that as like, well, that's restricting their rights, and with attacking specifically women going to school, that's against their rights. But to the Taliban, that's their way of life, that's their religion, and that would require cultural relativism. It would require me being in that actual position of that culture to realize that it's their way, it's what they believe and what they know to be true, and when people go against that is when they revolt and they attack, which is a horrible thing. And another requirement that she had was not only just in school, and she was struggling to get good grades and do all of her schoolwork and get it all done because she loved it so much, but she had so many chores to do at home, which made it hard for her to get the most out of her education. Quickly moving to the young boy in Brazil, just thinking about how all of the drugs and all of the drug lords and the terrible things that go on where this boy is growing up, and how hard it must be for his mother having to go to school or going to work all day and leaving her kids at home alone without any protection. I think that would be a huge sacrifice and be so, so hard. And it makes me grateful for what I have in the United States, that I'm able to live in a safe place and attend school and get an education for myself. Whereas this young boy just is afraid to even, like, it's dangerous for him to even go outside of his house, to even walk to school. And they talked about, too, how he was so well educated that they brought him up a grade, but he's in 5th grade now, or in 2009, and was about to graduate and go to middle school, but they decided to hold him back instead of allowing him to go on to middle school because they didn't think socially he was strong enough to handle the stresses of going to middle school, so they held him back, which I feel like is going to make him want to drop out, because at the graduation he was so upset and so sad, and because he wasn't able to move on. And he's very smart too, and he just felt really sad. He said that he felt sad, and that broke my heart because he is such a smart kid, and I feel like he will end up dropping out because he's just relearning the stuff that he already knew, and he's going to lose interest, and it's just a downward cycle. They had programs for after school programs to keep the kids off the streets, which was really cool. I'm glad that they do that. And he works so hard to get an education because he loves it so much. It inspires me. It makes me want to stop whining and complaining about my homework level, because there's kids out there who want the education so bad and they don't get it. In India, they talked about how women rarely have the opportunity to get an education, and they talked about this girl who was 15, I believe, and she couldn't attend school because it was during the daytime, so the country started providing night schools, which I thought was awesome because they have a push for education. But what happened is that she had to stop attending night school because of her chore level got more strenuous. So she didn't have time to go to school. She didn't have time to get an education. And she ended up dropping out for 4 months, I believe they said, which put her back a year, put her back in her studies. And so then when she was ready to come back to school, she was already so far behind that she had to be put in school with the second graders, and she was 15. So she felt really stupid and felt really awkward and got made fun of. So that made her drop out. It's just this downward cycle that they get caught in, and it's heartbreaking to see because this girl is so smart, and at the end talked about her wondering about the stars and wanting to learn about the stars, but she said, but I don't know who's going to teach me. Who's going to teach me? And so she just wants that education so bad, but no one can give it to her. She can't get that education, which is heartbreaking. In Japan, on the other hand, enrollment's 100%. I believe it said at the beginning. And this young boy is getting his education. He started when he was 1 year old. Insane, with education and going to school and whatnot. And he even had after school programs, and they decided that year when he was young, when like 6 years old or something, that they shouldn't have school on Saturdays, give the kids a break. And I think that's crazy. At least they have a strong education system, whereas other countries don't. But I feel like that's a little extensive. I thought it was interesting too that in other countries like India and Afghanistan, the boys and the girls go to separate schools, and they're specifically taught these things, and the women always do the housework, and the men always just kind of hang out and do their own thing. Whereas in Japan, the boys actually have to take a home economics class, and they have to learn sewing, which is interesting that in Japan that they would have that. And like in America too, I know that in middle school, there was a requirement for me back home in Oregon that the boys and the girls both took this home economics class, and they learned how to cook and how to clean and how to sew and do those kind of things. Whereas in other countries, boys are laughed at for doing those things. And so I thought that was interesting. Um, another like need for cultural relativism to completely understand that. But I really enjoyed watching this video and learning about different cultures and their views on education, especially for women, and makes me so much more grateful that I am able to attend school and that I'm able to gain an education. And I'm proud to be an American, grateful for the gospel and for also the value that it gives on women and their divine role, whereas in other countries they're kind of swept aside and expected to do just what the men say. So there you go. There's my discussion on time for school.